Hello and welcome to a Tuesday Talkie, or maybe another day, on the Bearfoot Miniatures channel. Today we're going to be going over Spyrer gangs and the best ways to spread terror in the Underhive and Underhells. So today we're going to be going over the Spyrers and Secundian Incursion gangs. If you like this video, if you want to add a bit more to the info, comment below, because if I have missed something, it's really helpful to everyone else watching this guide and for me actually reading those comments later to see it below. If you really like the video and you want to support the channel that little bit more, as well as get access to the full Secundian Incursion campaign that is out now on Patreon exclusive, there is a link below, and you can also get yourself podcast versions of these videos, early access, access to the Discord, as well as dice sent to your house directly to you, or I suppose to a PO box wherever you want it sent. So we're going to be doing both Spyrer gangs as well as using them as a foundation for looking at incursion gangs, which are essentially just a normal gang with a Spyrer added in place of the leader. Now, Spyrers in total are a very low model count gang. Most of the lists that I tend to be writing end up with 3 models in. You can get to 4 if you sort of cheap out on Spyrers, but you do miss out on some of the bigger toys and cool models that you've got access to, like the Orrus, because that's really expensive, coming in at 350 points base and really 400 points for how I'm going to be recommending you load out your Orrus for the Underhive and Underhells. To balance that out, you're going to be taking bottle checks on D3s rather than D6s. They've got multiple activations per fighter to essentially game-wise step them up, make them feel more like these bigger heroes that are going to be doing much more, as well as not being out-activated too horrendously by other gangs. As I said, if you have 3 fighters and 2 activations each, that's then going to end up in 6 activations. So you will still be slightly out-activated, but not by the extreme degrees that if you turned up with a regular gang with 3 fighters, you just get absolutely messed about by them activating chaff before your best fighter could go, which just wouldn't work. So it's a nice little addition that they've added that it not only powers up the Spyrers, but also helps out with the alternating activations game that is a big part of Necromunda. Now, your gang can't have alliances, and you can't have hired guns, so you can't bulk out your gang with things like scum, bounty hunters, things like that, because just no one's interested in operating with the Spyrers, and they're not interested in operating with anyone else. You also can't get hangers on, so no docs, though as we'll get to it, the replacement for the critical injuries table means that it's not such a blow. In campaigns, you won't be gaining any income other than during the downtime, and even then that can't be used to buy more Spyrers. What that can be used for is to upgrade your weapons or war gear. You can repair glitches, which are essentially the Spyrer's mechanic of injury, or you can hire Caryatid primes, which essentially make your character a bit luckier. It's an item of war gear, exotic beast, that allows you to re-roll an armor save or ammo check once per turn. And they're also quite hard to kill themselves with, I think it's off the top of my head, a 3-up dodge. But we'll get to the Caryatid Prime when we actually get there. Now, because they can't get any money, you also can't sell captives to the guilders. The fluff justification for this is that you essentially we just want to use that fighter as bait to rack up your kill count and increase the terror the gang is causing. And it fits quite nicely with the gang, revolving around these hunting parties that don't really grow, they just get better. Now, there is a way to add more fighters to the gang, and that's through the increasing terror level, which essentially is when you fight a battle, when you win a battle, you can perform a terror purge that earns you 2 XP for every fighter. In addition to that, it increases the terror level. The terror level starts at 1, and you gain additions to the terror like rep. And as that builds, you will get different bonuses. So increasing the terror level. If there is a censure event, at least 4 enemy fighters or vehicles taken out of action during a game as a direct result of action taken by a Spyrer, so they can't set on fire and die due to the fire. That increases the terror level by 1. Cull the leadership, taking out a leader or champion directly by a Spyrer is an additional 1. Or if 1 or more enemy fighters or vehicles was taken out of action or a vehicle wrecked during the first round, that's +1. Now, very much in Necromunda, the first round is a movement round, but with Spyrers being able to activate twice in the round, it is actually quite likely that they'll be able to take out a bit of chaff. Maybe not a champion, but you could just ping a wound through on an enemy fighter and it's perfectly doable, especially if you're playing with smaller maps like we've seen in the Secundian Incursion campaign that comes in the box set. Now, the benefits of the terror level is that at 1 to 4, so sort of like when brutes or when your rep is at the lowest level, there's no boon. A 5 to 9 means that you can immediately equip a Spyrer with a Caryatid Prime for free. 10 to 14, the gang may immediately hire another Spyrer with a total cost including equipment of 300 creds or less, so you can't hire an Orrus at that level. 15 to 19, an additional Spyrer may perform a post-battle action even while in convalescence during every post-battle sequence. And 20 plus, you can hire an additional Spyrer with 400 credits or less, including war gear. So that is where you can get a second Orrus, which are some of the tankier and I would say better Spyrers that there are out there. Now, one thing that actually I misspoke about 2 minutes ago, saying about the Terror Purge giving additional terror levels. Now, that's just because it's a confusingly worded rule. So we'll just roll with it. Forgive me for misspeaking in that one. Finally, Spyrers come with a unique territory, the Spyrer Base Camp, which gives you a Recover Systems boon. During the wrap-up of each battle, 1 Spyrer can perform post-battle actions even if they are in convalescence. A Spyrer hunting party can never lose this territory. It's sort of like the Enforcer's Precinct, like that. Now, all of these make for quite a slowly building gang, and you won't get many fighters. It will take you a while, even with, say, taking out 3 champions and leaders per game, as well as taking 4 total fighters out of action. That'll get you an additional 4 terror per game. It will take you 3 games at that, taking out 4 fighters total and 3 champions and leaders, to get to gaining another Spyrer, which, when everyone else is gaining credits all the time in a normal campaign, that can be really harsh. Now, in the Underhells campaign, credits aren't found that dramatically fast, so it won't be as much of a downside as normal. But when you start factoring territories and things like that, it is a bit of a hindrance. How you're going to keep up with other gangs is actually in how you gain experience. And that's both with the Terror Purge for the additional XP there, but also in sort of a different type of experience. And that's your kill count. So for every enemy fighter that a Spyrer takes out of action, you gain both an XP as normal and rack up a kill count. And for every 4 kills that you get, or for every 4 out of action results that you cause, a Spyrer can either gain a power boost on the power boost by rolling on the power boost table, or remove a glitch. So it's another way to remove these lasting injuries that you rack up instead of normal lasting injuries. The power boost table, though, is actually pretty powerful. It's like another form of leveling up, but just obviously a bit more random. So the power boosts are, on a 1, you gain +1 weapon skill or BS, and you're already weapon skill 3 or BS 3 at minimum, sometimes you 2. So it doesn't take you many of those 1s to get to a 2-up, 2-up. Heightened reactions increase the initiative by 1 to a maximum of 2. Again, you usually start off with initiative 3, so you get very fast, very adept fighters very quickly by simply taking out 4 total enemy models. 3, you improve the movement speed by 1 to a maximum of 8, which is incredibly powerful. Actually, moving faster is so good for combat characters, for shooting characters, and when you're actually activating twice, one of my preferred builds for these Spyrers has been, after testing them out in the Secundian Incursion campaign and a couple of skirmishes, has been to be moving really fast, utilizing hip shooting, and having such a long travel distance, like 8 inches it gets to quite a lot of the time. So you can go up to, with a double move and then shoot, and then a double move and shoot, 32 inches a turn, which is absolutely insane. Number 4 is thickened armor, so increase the Spyrer's armor save by 1 to a maximum of 2+. Now, a lot of the armors that Spyrers have is 5s, and then just getting a simple increase to a 4 gives a pretty solid armor value. And finally, hunting rig augmentation. So this is something that actually increases the power of your weapons as well as your hunting rig, which is your armor that you're going to be encapsulated in. And all of this sort of adds up to a fighter that levels up essentially twice as fast as anyone else is in any other gang. And due to the fact that your Spyrers are quite powerful, it means that you keep pace and become very, very strong, very, very fast. In addition to this, you've got 2 other rules. Now, we've already slightly been over the reflex enhancers, so not including that. The reflex enhancers is gain an extra ready marker, and then that allows you to activate twice, and you do that every turn, so you're activating twice every turn. Now, the other 2 differences from a regular gang or fighter is Master of the Hunt. When you're hit by a ranged attack, you only place prone and pinned if the attack damages them, such as you lose a wound or take a flesh wound. So you won't be hitting the deck nearly so often as any other fighter by just getting winged and they fail to wound you. You just don't care. You can't ever be captured and instead suffer superficial damage. Keeps your gang quite strong, I suppose. You never have to go and fight to get them back while they're being useless, because it would be 33% of your gang gone if one of your fighters was captured, which is really harsh. Spyrers also don't suffer side effects from chems and never become addicted to them. Now that is incredibly good. Having friends on fighters, gaining essentially 4 skills for just taking some drugs. Like, friends on harnesses are already incredibly powerful, and this is something that allows Spyrers to not even have to invest in that. You can just take some friends on stim, never become addicted, and you don't suffer the negative side effects therefore. A Spyrer never needs to check to see if they become broken if a friendly model goes out of action near them, and you take bottle checks on a D3 instead of D6, which we touched on before. Finally, you have the Spyrer hunting rig glitches, and instead of rolling on the lasting injuries table, essentially you roll on this table, which is much less harsh than a normal table. So up to, even in the 6s where you'd normally go to dock, and this is what I'm talking about really by less harsh, even in the 6s you don't go to dock, you just start reducing the results that are quite bad for you. The difference of the main downside of the table is when you get a multiple injuries style result, the multiple glitches. You roll D3 times on the table and you don't ignore any results, so you could actually get a critical overload, which is a memorable death result to everyone else. So this then can also be removed, if you remember, by racking up your kill count. So any actual lasting damage that's really bad for you can get resolved, can get removed by just simply getting 4 out of action results on someone. In addition, during the downtimes, when you get your credits for the gang, you can also remove all the glitches from a fighter for 100 credits. So it essentially comes back fresh as a fresh fighter for just 100 credits, which is really good for keeping your experienced models in the fight. They don't start getting low toughness and then essentially useless, or things like that other fighters in other gangs might start getting, where you're just like, oh, it's just another mouth to feed, I'll sack them off actually because they've got too low toughness or too low strength and they're now useless to me. That doesn't really happen to Spyrers. And that's the sort of general introduction to Spyrers. So now we'll start going through the actual gang. So this is actually a sponsored video by Games Workshop. I haven't sent me a review copy. They've not paid me off to say nice things about Spyrers. What they've asked me to do though is not show the actual pages from the book, but I was allowed to type up any bits that I wanted from the book. So you'll be seeing throughout the guide my typed up copies of of the actual book. So the first one we're going to go to is the Orrus Spyre, and the reason I've skipped out the Spyre Hunt Master for now is that it actually utilizes weapon systems from other Spyrers. So we'll circle back to the Hunt Master when we've worked our way through which weapons are good on an individual basis. Otherwise, I'll start repeating myself as we go through or not give justice to the Spyrers that we're working through. Now, the Orrus is the heavy, the tank of the bunch. You get still quite a fast movement speed of 5, which you'd normally expect to see slower on stuff like Goliath that are also the tough ones. But we get a weapon skill and ballistic skill of 3. You get a strength of 3, which seems low until we start factoring the weapons that the Spyre comes with. You get a toughness of 4, 3 wounds, initiative 3, 2 attacks, though as your weapons are paired, this will be doubled when you charge. You get pretty solid mental stats with a cool of 5 being the most important, as well as an intelligence of 6 for harvesting data coils in the Underhells campaign. And you start with a 4 up save and a 6 up field save, which are some of the better ones for Spyrers. Now this clocks in at 350 points with the base war gear, which is the power talon as well as the bolt cannons. You start off with 1 skill like a normal champion, and you have quite a limited range of war gear options. So let's go through them and compare them. Now, the first one that you actually start off with is the bolt launchers. You get 2 of them, and these are actually my favorites. They've got a short range of 8 in which you get +1 to hit. You've got a 20-inch long range, strength 4, damage 1, a 4 up ammo, rapid fire 1, and sidearm. Though I wouldn't expect he'd ever really use that sidearm in combat. He's only ever going to be to go 2 guns blazing with both fists. For that as well, when you get hunting rig augmentations, you can get tier 1 going up to damage 2. Tier 2 is AP -2. And tier 3 is rapid fire 2, which having rapid fire 2 on 2 sidearms is absolutely terrifying. Absolutely crazy. That compared to the Volkite, which is a 5-inch short, a 10-inch long, at strength 5, damage 1, deflagrate sidearm, with damage 2, AP -1, and a 12-inch long range for your upgrades. Going to damage 2, well, I get that with the bolt cannon anyway. The AP at tier 2 and base is both worse than the bolt launchers, and getting a range increase from 10 to 12, although yes, it gains you 20% of the range, it's not that impactful for me, I wouldn't say. And especially when you want to sometimes start getting fire down at longer ranges, it's a bit of a negative. You want your Spyre to, normally I don't say you want to be a jack of all trades, but you're going to be very good at everything that you do. So you sort of want to be good at long range warfare as well for taking on those gangs that are just going to try and back off all the time. Disintegrators, I'd say, are a terrible, terrible choice. Now, they've got a 3-inch short and a 12-inch long, and they've got a -1 to hit penalty at long range. That means that you'll be most of the time in that long range hitting at -1, so you'll be hitting on 4s. And if you use your twin guns blazing, that's now 5s. If they're in even partial cover, you're now hitting on 6s with 2 shots, and you've got just as much chance to roll an ammo check, which is a 1 in 6 chance, as you have to actually hit the target. And the reason I say that about an ammo check is because you have the unstable trait. When you have the unstable trait, if you roll an ammo dice, in addition to your ammo roll, you roll a d6. On a 1 to 3, you're just taken out of action. And it's just too many creds to have in that basket. Even though the gun is strength 5, AP -2, 2 damage, with Sever being really good in that you don't roll an injury dice, you just take the fighter out of action. Even though it's got that, oh, it's such a negative. Tier 1 removes scarce from the weapon, Tier 2 AP -3, and Tier 3 3 damage. But all of that, if you roll an ammo check, 50% of the time you're going out of ammo. So that means your Spyre isn't going to be shooting unless you really, really need it to. And if that's the case, a third of the time, or a third of your firepower, is gone from the gang unless you desperately need it in a clutch situation. So my personal pick is the bolt launchers. At tier 3, you're going up to essentially 4 bolters on this one model, and you can activate twice a turn, so firing twice. And that's a positive for the bolt launchers. It's a positive for the Volkite discharger, but for the disintegration matrix, it's a negative because I've got more chance of taking myself out of action just immediately, ignoring my wounds, ignoring my armor, gone. And that's why I do not like the disintegration matrix. Now, for your actual fists, I've used the power talons, or Phil has used the power talons because I was playing Steelers a fair bit. And yes, they can peel open armor. They're AP -3, +1 strength, but they're 1 damage and paired. Weirdly, they lack power because they're called power talons. So why do they not have power? But assuming that's a mistake, and I'm not going to factor it into what I think of them, but I assume that's a mistake. Now, it brings you up to strength 4, which is respectable. AP -3, though, is really good for cracking cans. It's the 1 damage that really puts me off, because as soon as you get into a champion, things like that, which might have a decent save, or field, by which I mean a field save, because they won't have a decent save as soon as you put the power talon in, I just found that they don't, for what needs to be a heavy hitter for your gang, the Orrus, I found that the lack of damage really hurts. Now, the upgrades for the power talons is to gain rending at tier 1. So yes, you can increase your damage there by rolling a 6, though. Increase to damage 2 at tier 2. Still, you're now at tier 2, which when we get into comparisons, you'll see why I still prefer the fist. And then tier 3, you've got strength +2. So you're going up to the same strength as the fist. At late game, it can be okay because you've got that high AP. But the fists, you've got strength +2 all the time. You've got AP -1, which is okay at the start of the game, especially because you've got paired on both of these weapons getting a lot of attacks. As you get into later stages, it doesn't quite cut it. But what you do have is 2 damage. So if 1 hit goes through, champions are KO'd. You've got power as well, which means on a 6 to hit, the damage is increased by 1 and no saves are allowed. So on the first step, not fishing for 6s on the to wound, which you've got a much reduced dice pool there. 6s on the first step, and then you've got more chance to actually wound with those ignoring save hits because you've got a higher strength. Now, your upgrades there are to gain pulverize. convert a flesh wound to a serious injury, it can be okay. But at tier 2, your AP goes to -2, so you're drawing closer to the talons. And at tier 3, your damage goes to 3, so you're just gonna punch through brutes, through enemy gang leaders with 3 wounds, through malstrained stealers. Yes, it costs you 50 creds to upgrade to them, but I think actually they're much more worthwhile than the power talons for me personally. I'm happy to fish for that 6 to get power, but that comes combined with a high damage, higher strength, and just a happier place to be in. Now, gaining a skill fits in with these weapons, I think, quite a lot. You've got agility secondary, brawn primary, combat primary, ferocity secondary, and shooting primary. Now, at first I was a bit like, rubbish. I sort of want ferocity to start off with because I sort of still want nerves of steel so that even when I take one of my 3 wounds, I can stay stood up. But with having 2 bolt launchers and wanting to fire them both in a turn, and also having a high movement and activating twice, hip shooting, I think is going to be one of the key skill sets for the gang. Anyone that can take hip shooting with a ranged weapon, I think not being outmaneuvered by these Spyre gangs, staying fast, staying mobile, it's worth taking hip shooting. And then getting the twin guns blazing to be able to shoot gunfighter, to shoot twice without taking, or shoot both your weapons without taking a -1 to hit modifier for shooting both weapons. Finally, we get onto any war gear choices. Now, unlike in the Incursion campaign, you do actually need to buy lights or photo goggles. Bio boosters are nice. I'd keep the credits down in the war gear section. You might want to take photo goggles if you've got a spare 35 credits. But if you can possibly get another fighter into the gang by dropping those photo goggles, do it. Now, spoilers for the list, it is something I found the credits for in my list because I chose a 3 fighter route rather than the 4 fighter route for the gang. And that's sort of my thoughts on the Orrus. It's a solid fighter. I really like how it stacks up against other tanks in the game and combat monsters. You've got enough damage output. You are a bit more fragile than the model would suggest. So it's not a Space Marine Terminator because he's wearing a hunting rig, and it took me a while to wrap my head around, oh, it's a hunting rig, it's not like a battle suit. So it is a bit fragile. You still need to be careful at toughness 4 of like maximal charge plasma guns or melters. Still watch out for those. Prioritize them to take out with your bolt launchers. And that's one of the reasons having this longer range is going to be really useful within the gang, because there are some things that will still really scare you. Next up, we're going to be going over the Jakara Spyrer Hunter. At 250 creds, you can fit, if you don't upgrade anything in the gang, 4 fighters by just going this route. It's one of the faster fighters at movement 6 and weapon skill 2, makes it a combat monster. You start off, however, with strength and toughness 3, 2 wounds, you've got initiative 3, 3 attacks, and you've got cool 5 and some solid other like fluff stats. Essentially, you're going to have brawn, combat, and cunning as your primary skills, with ferocity as secondary and agility as secondary. You're going to start with a monomolecular sword, as well as a mirror shield, and you can replace that for a Naga blade instead of your sword for free. Now, what they do is the mono sword is strength +1, AP -2, damage 1, and that's melee, parry, power. Replacing that with the Naga blade, which is A versatile weapon, so has engaged and 2-inch range, strength +2, damage 2, AP -1, and has disarm and parry. Lacks the power that the monomolecular sword has. Out of those two, on the initial take, I think the Naga Blade is the better one. Versatile is just such a powerful rule, and although you are strength 3, going up to strength 5 means you wounding most things on 3s, and even if they do get to strike back, a lot of the time they're not going to be able to, because you'll stop your charge 2 inches before the enemy model. It essentially puts you up to movement 8 in real terms when comparing your charge distances to other things. So useful. Now the upgrades to those, the monomolecular sword goes to damage 2 at first, AP -3 and strength +2. So much better at getting through armor. However, the Naga Blade gains shock, AP -2, then damage 3. What shock does is a 6 to hit, automatically wounds. So you're getting through those higher toughness opponents slightly more easily. And when you get to the end of the track, you're going to be doing 3 damage. Again, it's stacking those damages. The AP isn't too much of a downside when you can't be hit back. Yes, you probably will end up picking on the weaker members of your opponent's gang that don't have so much armor, unlike your Orrus, which can sort of just pile in and start punching people or run about shooting. Your mirror shield is a 4-inch range, 8-inch long with a -1 to hit at long range. It doesn't do any damage though. What it does do is have energy shield and flash. Energy shield being that you get a +2 to your armor in your front arc in melee, and +1 to your armor ranged in your front arc. And that'll give you a 3-up save in combat and a 4-up save out of combat. So you're actually quite sturdy. The flash special rule means that enemy fighters that are hit by it have to take an initiative test, or they are blound if you've watched my 30k games. That means that they lose their ready marker this turn if they have one, or next turn they lose it then if they don't have a ready marker currently in this turn. So it can be really, really powerful. You stun lock people, which is absolutely horrible to face, especially for those higher initiative fighters that are just going to be losing that test all the time. Finally, your rig, as you know, you've got a 5-up save, which is a 3-up save in combat due to the shield. The upgrades for it are at tier 1, you get strength +1, going to strength 4, and then when combined with a Naga Blade, going to strength 6. So you now double the strength of a toughness 3 opponent. And then at tier 2, you get +1 attack, so you're going to 4 attacks, and that'll be 5 on the charge, which is an insane number of attacks, really. And it's only going to take you 8 kills to get to these sort of levels if you want a tier 2 upgrade. And I think it's really, really good. When combined with that +1 strength, the Naga Blade, wounding toughness 3 opponents and even toughness 5 opponents on 3s, and toughness 3 opponents on 2s, I suppose, makes you so reliable at wounding things. And then with 2 damage, if a hit slips through armor, which a lot of fighters I find don't have a lot of armor, like they might have 1 or 2 members of their gang that has a really high save, but a lot of members of gangs tend to have 5-up saves. It will just absolutely decimate people reliably, as I suppose a Spyrer should. Now, as I said, my preferred loadout for this is the Naga Blade and Mirror Shield. For the skill as it comes into it, essentially I think you've got 3 real ways to go. Now, that's by using Cunning to gain Infiltrate if you want to be rocked up the board. You can leave yourself out on a bit of a limb unless you're doing that with multiple fighters, though. Even if you are a Spyrer, You've also in Cunning got Evade. Now, Evade gives you a -1 to hit modifier at any range if you're not in cover, and -2 at long range if you're not in cover. So it essentially makes you in varying degrees of cover all the time, regardless of whether you're actually stood in cover. And I think that is really useful for keeping your Spyres alive. It's useful on any fighter, but in such a low model count gang where you might not be able to deal with every threat straight away, getting flanked by something and them catching you out of cover is actually a real threat. So having evade or evasive, I suppose, will be a real help to keep your Spyres alive. You've got the damage output already, so having some defensive buffs that don't rely on AP, can't be negated by a weapons AP, I think is a real benefit. Now, finally, for combat, you can use Step Aside. If you're worried about getting ravaged by combat monsters, Step Aside allows you to make an initiative roll and avoid the blow. So it's a single blow per activation, but it will just cut down on that amount of attacks that are coming in, especially when you combine it with your parry on your Naga Blade and Mono Sword to just, and then as well with your shield coming into that to give you a 3-up save, Step Aside in any blows or like one of the blows. It can make you actually quite defensive, or in a good way, defensively strong as a Spyrer and Hunter. So that is my opinion on the Jakara. Next we come to the Malcadon, potentially the best equipped Spyrer that there is. Got 220 credits, and you're upgrading weapons being free. Again, it's another cheaper end fighter that you don't have to splash too many credits in Spyre turns on. You've got movement 7, which is absolutely rapid. Then you've got 3s for weapon skill through toughness, 2 wounds, initiative 3, 2 attacks, and Spyre mental stats. Again, cool 5 being the important one. You start off with a Malcadon hunting rig, which gives you a 5-up save, a drop rig, grapnel launchers, paired web incisors, and paired Malcadon slashing claws. You can swap out the slashing claws for toxin whips for free. And would you want to do that? Now, the paired claws, a strength user, AP -2, damage 1 and paired. So that's going to give you to start off with 4 attacks on the charge, 5 for 2 close combat weapons, 6 for charging. And that's because of paired doubling your attacks characteristic. But you're still going to be strength 3. The upgrades make you AP -3, damage 2 and strength +1 for the 3 tiers. So it's going to be quite late game that you start getting that higher strengths, unless you get suit upgrades to put into strength or buy strength with additional XP. The paired whips, however, are engaged and versatile 2 inches with -1 to hit at long. However, your 3-up weapon skill anyway, hitting on 4s with a lot of attacks because it's paired whips isn't too bad to hit on 4s and not be struck back. Again, it gives you that essentially movement 9 plus the D3 for charging compared to regular fighters, because you can fight from 2 inches further away than anyone else. Really, really useful. The whips come with toxin, so essentially your low strength doesn't matter. What matters is the enemy's toughness. And at the start of the campaign, at least, unless you're going up against Ogryns, that's going to be really, really useful. Your AP -2, so that your toxin goes through pretty reliably, and entangle. Your upgrades to the toxin whips gives you a loss of the -1 accuracy modifier at long range for the tier 1, shield breaker tier 2, and then enemy toughness is counted as 1 lower than normal for the toxin at tier 3, and that stacks with chem synths that you'll be able to buy from the trading post during downtime. Now that is incredibly good. It means that toughness 5 fighters, you're wounding on 3. Toughness 6, you're wounding half the time when stacked with a chem synth. So I actually really think the Toxin Whips are the way to go with the Malcadon. That Toxin is just incredibly good to just ignore wounds, go through our wounds. AP -2, incredible, or incredible combined with Toxin. And then stacking the tier 3 -1 to the Toxin, the toughness for the Toxin roll, incredibly good. Now your rig, the first level is add weapon skill or ballistic skill. The second level is to give you an armor save of 4 up. Actually, really good. The weapon skill being +1 on the first tier of the rig upgrade balances out your -1 to hit at long range modifier, so you'll still be hitting on 3s if you're in that versatile range of the Toxin Whips. And then when obviously you get to tier 1 of the Toxin Whips, it makes you hit on 2 up. So it's actually worth, I would say, going rig upgrade 1 before you go Toxin Whip upgrade 1, unless like you're really desperate to get to that enemy toughness -1 first. Finally, your ranged weapon are the web incisors. Now this is 4 in short range, 8 inch long, but no minuses to hit it either. You've got strength 3, ammo 4, silent, and web. The upgrades to that are long range becomes 10 inches, strength 4, and then long range becomes 12. And web is really, really good. BS being 3, yes, you'll hit targets in heavy cover on 5s, but web, skipping out the armor save step, skipping out wounds, going straight to serious, is an excellent, excellent rule. It's another way to take down big, tough opponents with actually quite a low strength and light gang or fighter. I almost said ganger, but not ganger. A light fighter. And actually, I think really pairs well both this entire play style of being light, being mobile, and being able to take on fighters bigger than they are, pairs really well with the war gear options that are included as standard, which are the drop rig and grapnel launcher. So grapnel launchers allow you to do a double action to move 12 inches any point in line of sight, and that'll let you go up levels. So that's although you look at it and go, oh, 12 inches, I could just go directly for 12 in 12 inches. I can sprint longer than that. Yes, you can, but this allows you to ignore levels, essentially. The drop rig, the same in reverse. You can go down levels basically as far as you want with it, unless you're playing on someone's tower like board that goes off into infinity. Just massively increases your mobility. And when combined with your 2 activations, I think pairs really well with the weapons that you've got to outflank your opponents and get into an optimal position to strike. Second to last, we've got the Yeld Spyrer Hunter for 220 credits. Again, another light fighter. You've got movement 7, weapon skill 4, ballistic skill 2, 3 and 3 for strength and toughness, 2 wounds, initiative 3, 2 attacks, Spyrer mental stats. The Yeld rig is that you get a -1 to hit the Yeld if the Yeld stays still. And you also have wings. So your Yeld Spyrer can fly, ignoring all terrain, and can move freely between levels without restriction, and can never fall, such as down a Hive Secundus pit into infinity forever. You come standard with Yeld laser gauntlets, which are range 20, +1 to hit at short range, strength 3, AP -1, 1 damage. It's a 3-up ammo, plentiful, and rapid fire 1. Now, I personally think infinitely better than that is the free upgrade to Yeld missile gauntlets, which are 15 inch short, 30 inch long, strength 5, damage 1, 4-up ammo, knockback, and rapid fire 1. You just miss out the plentiful. That's because it's got such a better strength. I'm perfectly willing to trade off having to reload normally for that plentiful, especially for my 220 credit Yeld. It just feels a bit too low. Does that strength 3? I know it's rapid fire 1 and you've got 2 of them. It just feels a bit too low. Does that strength 3? Though I suppose if you were flying about and effectively had 2 bolt guns that you're firing at people with, it may be a bit too harsh because they'll never catch you. The upgrades to those, the laser gauntlets get AP -2, long range 24, and a strength 4. None of those come in close to the missile gauntlets except the AP. The missiles upgrades AP -1, so staying level or within its realms with the laser gauntlets at first level, strength 6 at second, then gaining a 3-inch blast to go with that knockback at third level. And you've got 2 of these, remember. So really, really powerful. You putting rapid fire blasts down. Incredibly good. Your rig giving you a 5-up save normally. You get +1 movement at tier 1, so straight to movement 8. And then -1 to hit for you if you've moved or not. So even when you've moved, it's -1 to hit. Now that key bit there is one of the reasons why I think for this fighter, you've got a bit of a dilemma at the start. You're shooting primary. Yes, hip shooting is amazing. You want 2 guns blazing gunfighter, whatever it's called, to not take -1 to hit. But also, it'd be really nice to have evade. And I sort of don't think there's a wrong choice between any of them. Maybe if you are someone that errs cautiously, like go with evade, because you can always shoot again next turn if you've not died. Might be the cautious way to take it. Or alternatively, hip shooting and just fly everywhere and just go absolutely crazy. Now, your combat weapons for the Yeld are worse than anyone else's in the gang. You've got a strength +1, AP -1, damage 1, wings. And that's upgraded to parry, damage 2, then knock back at the tier levels. But honestly, I'd put all my points into upgrading the rig and the missiles. And yes, if you keep rolling them relentlessly to get upgrades and you've got more than 6, so you've taken 24 fighters out of action plus more across the campaign, I'd then start going into wings. But really, keep this fighter out of combat, keep it moving with the hip shooting, and get that -1 to hit whether you've moved or not, as well as evade. And you can just put relentless damage down on your opponent all game. Finally, for the Spyrers, before we get into the War Gear and then Secundian Incursion gangs, we've got the Spyrer Huntmaster. And at 180 credits, it seems far too cheap as you initially look at it. However, you've got to pay for your weapons on the Huntmaster. Now, you've got movement 6, weapon skill 2, ballistic skill 3, strength toughness 3, 3 wounds, initiative 3, attacks 3, and a Spyrer's stats. Your hunting rig, your sovereign hunting rig, gives you a 5-up save and a 6-up field. And essentially you're a hybrid between all the suits. Now, one of the things that I sort of ran up against when trying to what do I do with my Spyrer Huntmaster is I actually found that I just wanted to create one of the already done tropes or other Spyrer suiting hunting rigs, because they're actually set up quite nicely with each other. So my recommendation between the Malcadon slashing claws, the toxin whips, mirror shields, monomolecular swords, naga blades, and Yeld laser gauntlet or missile, all of those can sort of be done a bit better by their actual original rig. The one that I'd say the Huntmaster is closest to, or potentially better than, because of having that bit more toughness, by toughness I mean the additional wound and a 6-up field armor save that you can increase with the rig to 5, is a monomolecular sword and toxin whips. Now it's the toxin whips with web incisors that I really think are the good one, because it's got the engagement range of 2 inches for versatile with the toxin. All of the above apply, except I think the Malcadon with the with the upgrade bonuses to its suit, actually does the role slightly better. I've recommended a molecular sword there as well, because I basically just wanted to give a varied thing to the gang. I don't think there is a particularly best way to set up this fighter. I might looking, and I sort of change it every time I look at it now. On this particular record and run through that I'm thinking about for the gang, I'd potentially change the Yeld missile gauntlet, because, well, it gives everyone in the gang a ranged weapon, and that's quite nice to have. But other than that, there's no real good thinking of what I should put on it. If you at home come up with a good combination, please do leave it below in the comments so that I can let Matt, who will be playing Spyrers, know, so that he can upgrade his Spyrer leader to better than I can recommend him. But for now, yeah, I think it'd be Toxin Whips with the web incisors, Yeld Missile Gauntlet to be able to fire further. And you can see how much I changed my mind, because obviously I recommended the monomolecular sword when I wrote this. You get to start with also the experienced hunter rule. So you pick one weapon or war gear and increase its level by 1. Now, the thing that I'd be recommending there is one of your weapons upgrades, because I don't like relying on that 5++ straight away. I think it's a bit more of a luxury for your fighters. What I prefer to be doing is just avoiding situations where I'm taking that much damage all the time, trying to smart positioning behind cover. So I'd go on one of the weapons so you can immediately start putting the hurt down on the enemy gang and reducing their number of activations or useful activations as fast as possible, so you sort of even the score very quickly. For your skills, now what is it say? He's got leadership. Overseer's a really good skill set, right? I mean, yeah, he's obviously one to recommend, Overseer. I've tried to use Mentor. I don't think I got too much usage out of it when I played it with Lucky Lucille in the, I think, 2 campaigns ago in the Ghastly Prospects campaign. But having your Spyrers leveling up even faster, that's bad advice. Don't do that. Is combat, step aside, go in that bit defensive with your skill. So because you got to pick a primary skill set, you're a bit limited by what the Huntmaster can take. And actually, weirdly, with how it's, maybe just because they've actually set these fighters up quite well between all of the Spyrers, I think it's actually quite hard to recommend the Huntmaster, because the dedicated Spyrers just seem to work quite well. Now, one piece of war gear that we've skipped every time up to now is the Caryatid Prime. So we'll do that as if it's a separate fighter, but it's going to be quite quick, because really it's a buff thing rather than something that you're going to be actively using to get into combat. For 90 credits, your fighter, if the Caryatid Prime is within 3 inches, can re-roll 1 failed armor save or 1 failed ammo test per round. The Caryatid Prime can fly and can move 6 inches. And you're not going to really care about the exotic beast thing where they break and run back to their master if they're outside of, 3 inches, 6 inches, because you want to stay within 3 inches anyway. This is just entirely dedicated to keeping your Spyrers alive. And it does it okay, right? It's re-roll an armor save, not a field save. So when you do start getting those good field saves, you'll probably be likely facing high AP weapons as well and want to be re-rolling them, but can't. It's not something that I, in all of my sort of like list hammers, trying to come up with things to recommend, I've actually found the credits for. You get one as part of increasing the terror level of the campaign, so you will end up with one. It will be like kind of useful. However, I don't think there's something to prioritize, which is a bit of a shame, because the model is really, really nice. Next, we're going to be going over the example list that I've put together. And this has been quite a nice one to put together because actually it's quite fast. So my example list is the Huntmaster, Toxin Whip, Web Incisor, Grapnel Launcher, and Drop Rig. That all comes from the Malcadon. Monomolecular Blade, but as I said, I potentially look at swapping that out for the Yeld missile launcher. That will actually gain you 20 credits. So actually, you'll be able to afford photo goggles on the Huntmaster as well, swapping it out for the respirator because the Yeld missile launcher is cheaper than that monomolecular blade. The next pick was an Orrus Spyrer with bolt launchers, power fist, photo goggles, and hip shooting. Finally, a Yeld Spyrer with missile gauntlets, photo goggles, hip shooting. And all of that will allow you to maneuver as much as possible, and that'll minimize the downsides of your Spyre gang being so small, because you'll be able to be everywhere at once and fending off threats from multiple directions, getting into the right place at the right time to take out opponents. And if you can take a fighter out every round from the second turn onwards with each of your Spyrers, you're definitely going to win the game, I would say. And having two activations, being able to move fast all the time, is something that I think will really help with maintaining domination and terror across the table. So that is my Spyre rundown, actually. The final thing to do is to go over the Secundian Incursion gang. For this, you're essentially going to replace your primary fighter, your leader, with a Spyre. And that's, you're going to append that Spyre to any of the house gangs. So Dalak, Van Sar, Cawdor, Orlok, Goliath, or Escher. One of those, your leader is going to be replaced with a Spyre. This is actually a really powerful option. It can make up for some of the weaknesses in the gang. It can also add variety to the play styles that are available. So, say Van Sar, a fun gang, a really nice aesthetic, but you're actually missing out a lot of the time on combat because you've just not really got adequate access to it in order to spec into it as a style of play. Having a Spyre in the gang will allow you to do that. So if you want to play Van Sar and have a bit of a different play style for a campaign, but you still want to play it, you could take, say, an Orrus and have a completely different play style. On the flip side to that, if you have a really close combat focused gang and, I'm playing Goliaths, I want to switch it out for a bit, a Yeld could be completely different, maneuver warfare, that will add that variety to the gang. Now, your leader in the Secundian Incursion gang doesn't benefit from the gang hierarchy X rule and can never be included in group activations. If the Spyre dies, they can't be replaced. A new fighter has got to become the leader instead of another Spyre joining the gang. So if they do die on the 6/6 for the memorable death, that's just them gone. Unlucky. But you do get that longevity in the form of removing glitches and things like that. You just won't be able to pay for it during downtime because that's specifically a Spyre gang rule. I think it's quite a nice addition to like the general list. You can only use it in Underhell's campaigns for Hive Secundus because it is a Secundian Incursion gang. But I do think it adds that little bit of variety to the entire gang, or all of the house gangs, by just having that flexibility of which one that you take. Now, a core bit of the Secundian Incursion that we've seen before is the Van Sar Tek Hunters. Van Sar Tek Hunters are 70 credits. You've got one additional movement than a normal Van Sar. BS3 as standard for Van Sar, and essentially it's just a sub-tech. Sorry, not a sub-tech, and not just a tech. Essentially, it's just a tech with an additional movement in all the ways that matters. At recruitment, you were immediately a specialist, so that's definitely a positive for the Tek Hunters. And you're also an expert in the field, so that will determine what you want or what you can take as war gear options for all of the weapons and war gear. Now, we sort of went through them in the Secundian Incursion campaign that released last month in the guide. I'll run them down again. We've got the Auger Tech, which Las Carbine for 20 credits I really like. You've got Las Guns available to everyone, Las Pistols available to everyone, Sub Carbines, a combi weapon for a Flamer Mancatcher. That's from the Technomat only for 160 credits. Now that's both really expensive. It doesn't help with what Vansars need help with. Yes, it's got a close combat component. However, the Mancatcher is actually really weak in combat, and you just don't have enough attacks on the fighter for that to be worth it. A Flamer, it's really cool, but hitting things is one of the benefits of a Flamer, just to hit automatically. And a Champion with a plasma gun hits on a 2, so I don't really care that I hit automatically by a strength 4 weapon. I'll take the strength 5 of the plasma gun, thanks. And it's just really expensive. A long las on the gun tech for 20 credits. It's the same credits as a las carbine. I actually quite like this. It not only is it a really good model, but the like the long las being strength 4 at such range, getting the +1 to hit at range. If you are playing in the Ash Wastes or in an Underhive that isn't like Zone Metallic style, like more Sector Mechanicus style, can be really, really useful. And when combined with the war gear, such as the Refraction Cloak, which gives minuses to hit for the gun tech, I think it sets up really nicely and isn't too expensive. Radguns is a Technomat only, that's 100 credits. I just don't think Radguns work. Yes, they can do additional flesh wounds to people, but do you know what's better than maybe doing an additional flesh wound? Just blasting them with a plasma gun that's a similar points on a champion. It's like 40 points difference. And you'll just kill fighters instead. You'll have a better BS, better strength, and you'll just take them out. So it's a bit of a swing and a miss on the rad gun to me. You've got carapace armor that can be given to the Technomat. You've got mesh armor and flak armor. I definitely give mesh armor to everyone. It's a bit of a Vansar standard, 15 credits, adding to your armored undersuit to give you a 4-up save. Really, really standard. And I'd still be recommending it. Now, as we get to the personal equipment, we've got the Auger specs for the Auger Tech that doesn't allow enemy fighters to be placed near you when they're deploying onto the board as reserves. That can be quite useful in terms of the specific Underhells campaign, or if someone's just using infiltrate and wrecking everyone's day. It is quite expensive to be so situational at 20 credits though. The Bio Booster, roll an additional injury dice. Bit weird that it doesn't come on the Medicae, but I suppose he does have a Medicae kit, which is Biotechnist only, 30 credits. When assisting another fighter, roll an additional dice, so 3 total dice, and pick which one you want. Can be quite useful, quite expensive to be so situational. To already be dedicating credits to a doctor is a bit of a luxury. Yes, they can fight as well because they can have a las carbine. That's how I'd be equipping them. But I wouldn't take the Medicae kit straight away. What I'd be taking is the Servo Medicae for 15 credits. It allows you to do an action to immediately roll. So especially if you've got a Secundian Incursion gang where you want to get your really valuable Spyre fighter up straight away, you can pair them with a Tek Hunter. If your Tek Hunter hasn't activated yet and your Spyre is down, you run over, stab the Spyre, they recover, get up and shoot something really powerfully. It can be a really nice little combo. But having that Medicae kit is a luxury until you've already got the Servo Medicae and kitted out your fighters normally. Next, we've got the Vox Array. This is Augur Tech only, and it essentially allows you to activate an additional fighter as if you had because it gives you group activation 1. If I'm paying 30 credits to gain activations 1, making me 100 credits in total, why would I not pay 110 to become a champion? Because even if I'm balancing out with this, I could just take a Juve instead of something else and then gain group activation off the champion. I just don't see that as very worthwhile. It's a bit of a shame overall that these Tek Hunters don't have the post-game actions that they do in the Secundian Incursion campaign. I do think it devalues them a bit. They've got Gang Fighter Specialists, so yes, you can choose what XP upgrades they're going to be getting, but their weapons aren't brilliant. They're just a normal Ganger, and the amount of games that you go through where a normal Ganger just doesn't get any out of actions because all they've been is chaff, activation fodder, or all they've done all game is pin things. Is it worth it? Maybe. I think it's one of them. If I have a spare 15 credits and I'm taking a tech, I'll upgrade them to a Tek Hunter. If he was really min-maxing, I don't think they're worth it, but that isn't the way Necromunda should be played. So I've actually come up with a gang for the example gang of the Secundian Incursion fighters, and it includes Tek Hunters. So I've got an Orrus Spyrer with bolt launchers, power fists, photo goggles, hip shooting. I've got a biotechnist with las carbine mesh armor, and as soon as possible I'd be upgrading to a servo medicae on that so that I can stab my Orrus Spyrer and start pulling off that trick if they ever go down. I've got an Aug Mech, which is the champion level, with a plasma gun, mesh armor for a 4-up save, and hip shooting, so I can be running about along with my Spyrer. Although, yes, I've got a normal gang except for that one Spyrer, I'm still going to be lesser numbers than a fully house gang because I've spent 400 credits on a Spyrer. So having hip shooting, again, to get more board control, I think is really worthwhile. It's actually a combination that I really like on Vansar champions anyway. I've got a gun technist Tek Hunter with las carbine mesh armor. Interchangeably, I'd say you could swap that out with a long las. And this is sort of the choice that I'd say you can probably switch that gun technist to be any of the other ones at your own choice. I put gun technist, but it's, to me, the one that really stands out is the biotechnist. The other ones are sort of mediocre versions other than the +1 movement. I finally got 2 sub-techs with las guns and mesh armor to round out the gang. Bit more cheaper options to balance the fact that I've got the Spyre. I also quite like sub-techs in that they shoot as well as anyone else's normal gangers, and they're your Juves, and they're just so cheap. I think they do real work, especially with las guns being +1 to hit at 18-inch range. So you're now hitting on 3s. If you aim, it's 2s, and then they're really reliable for pinning the enemy, and that can really help out with your Spyrer to just keep your enemy pinned. You're running everywhere, and if they're pinned, they can't charge you. So that is my actual rundown of both the Spyrers and the Vansar Incursion, or the Incursion gangs and Vansar Incursion gang example. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you learned a little. Hopefully I didn't come across as too stupid. And I'll see you next time. In a bit.